So moving along with our schedule, we're now on to our next speaker. So our next speaker, you already know, you've already been introduced. Without further ado, I'm just going to welcome Alvin to continue that discussion we were having around allyship. So please give a warm welcome back to Alvin.
Good afternoon, everyone. While the slides are popping up, I'd love for you to check in with yourself. Where are you at right now, energy level wise? Out of 7. 7 is just a random number. 7 being I am still pumped up, ready to go. 1 being I'm just waiting long enough so I can leave so it doesn't look disrespectful. There's no wrong answer, but we're just checking in here, and this actually matters a lot in terms of this presentation. Because allyship, actually I'm gonna move, this will work hopefully. Allyship is a lot about how to support someone else when they're encountering something that's difficult and challenging. Of course, in the context of today, male allyship is going to be a thing, but know that one of the takeaways from this is that allyship is for everyone. You can be an ally to someone, because we have different intersections of privileges, advantages, things that we had access to that others may not have had as they were coming up through their career or through their life in general. And one of the other positions I take around allyship is that the skills you need to be an ally are the exact same skills you need to just be a leader in the workplace. Not just a leader of other people having direct reports, but just a leader for yourself and for the people that may be watching you and emulating you because of how far you reach up in your career. People are always watching. So I'd love for you to reflect for yourself. Think about a time when you were empowered by someone. So I'm not going to ask you to share the story of when someone effectively uplifted and empowered you. I'd love for you to think about, as a result of that, what did it allow you to do? AKA, what was the impact? Impact could be made you feel a certain way, made you do a certain way, do more or different. Think, do, think, and feel. Throw out some words, popcorn style it. And just to set the tone, I'm not going to be your speaking at the front for 40 minutes type of person. We're going to make this a conversation either between yourselves or with all of you with me. All right. Especially for those of you that haven't had a chance to speak up in the last few hours. I'd love to hear more of the voices that haven't had a chance to activate. What are some words? Impact, yes.
I guess like confidence, and then with confidence, like you're able to perform better.
Absolutely, yeah. Just and when I think of confidence, I think of it as energy. And it's like, yeah, I can show up. What other words?
Opportunities.
Opportunity. It meaning it created one for you, or you took an opportunity. Yeah. Perfect. Others. Everyone else has never been empowered in their life. It made you feel special. Yeah, and because it made you feel special, what did it do for you? Fulfilled. Yeah, it made you feel kind of warm and fuzzy inside. Nice. We all like that. Oh, yeah, validation as well of I'm doing the right things and yeah, I'm moving in the right direction. Great. One more. Yes. The light at the end of the tunnel. Ooh. Yeah, this has been hard so far, but I think I'm there. Almost there is what I'm gathering from it.
In construction industry, I do have an engineering degree, but I work in a construction industry. And sometimes it's harder for minority group to either get promoted or represent an idea that get backed up by upper management.
Mm-hmm.
You see a team who's supporting the idea of equality all over the board,
Mhm.
gives some hope. Because the industry itself so far has moved in the right direction, but it's
Mhm.
not where it's supposed to be.
Yes. And that's what I want to focus on in terms of this topic of allyship is um, uh, that your ideas and who you are has nothing to do with how someone decides to perceive you. And I'll unpack that as we go. Just for the sake of let's all ground in the same definition. Allyship, marginalized group. It's about being able to support and see and also understand what the experience might be from their perspective. But the word that I actually want to focus on here is effective. Because I can be an ally at any point in time and then suddenly stop being an ally in the next turn on a dime because I stopped being present or I thought I was being right and I didn't stop to check in. So there's a vigilance involved with this. A little bit about myself. I'll lead with my professional line. I started off as a chemical engineer focused on water and wastewater infrastructure. I went to school at McMaster, Dr. Kim Jones, who I can now call Kim instead of Dr. Jones, with her permission, was one of my first professors in second year at McMaster. Also was a TA for her around communication, and little did she know that planted the seed for me to go down the path that I'm in as a leadership development coach and facilitator. But back then, first 10 years, I spent quite a bit of time in construction, a lot of infrastructure asset management. So I worked a lot in multi-stakeholder teams, trying to figure out where do you spend your money and why is that important? Little did I know that asphalt comes in there's more than one type. It's not just black. It's like so many different types of asphalt. But lots of learning to be had. Like I said, asset management. It's about perspectives, actually. Someone who releases the money has a different priority set than someone who makes the decision on behalf of the people versus the engineering team and public works department that wants to just get it right technically. So there's different, if you will, competing priorities on things. And I mentioned that because this is a big part of what I do, leadership development, essentially work with teams and individuals. This is one of the ones I'm most proud of. That's at Duke University. So I designed a 6-month-long program, executive education program with the School of Environment at Duke. So we collect about 18 experienced leaders from all over the U.S. In water infrastructure. They all work for U.S. water utilities, but they're reaching a point in their career where they can no longer rely on being the subject matter expert. And a lot of what we get trained for in engineering school is to be the subject matter expert to get it right. And we sometimes default to treating other people like problems to be solved. How do we solve this person? Versus how do I understand this person and bring people along with me, regardless of whether I have a title that has a power dynamic. So a big part of what I do is how can you bring people along with you, especially when you don't have a power dynamic or the power differential is against you, such as counsel or the director or VP or CEO of your company, organization. Well, especially when you have an idea that you think might help, but you need to get sponsorship. So it's that process of social influence towards the achievement of a goal. Last month, I was at the Society of Women Engineers, SWE, local conference in Munich. It's about 500 people there. 2 days ago, I was at the Care of the Elderly conference in Hamilton, at the Union Station, for those of you from Hamilton. And the whole theme is about reinvention. In Munich, we talked about how allyship can be useful for maximizing the effectiveness of your team. And a big part of reinvention is really starts with you. Because if you want to see a change in a system, I have to essentially change how I orient myself within the system. So it doesn't matter if I'm the most brilliant person there, if the way I do and go about things has a negative impact on the overall system. Again, intent versus impact. I'll actually share a story. So right after I gave my 45-minute talk, I had this team from this, I won't identify who they are, huge university in Europe. And two professors, along with maybe they funded about 10 of their female students to come. And so I sat with them at the table. They flagged me down. I was like, hey, I want to chat with you. And so they started talking about a story about one of the top professors they have in the school that brings in a lot of the money in terms of funding into their program, but also had this reputation of being, and they were male, reputation of being a really terrible person to the people that became their PhD students. That people either quit or would be traumatized by the experience. And these two professors would, they would go into the HR and the department heads, and they would say, "We got to do something about this. This is not good." And HR's response, based on the story they told me, was, "Listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put in a complaint, and this is what's going to happen. They're going to talk to the guy, and then what's going to happen after that is the guy's going to say, yes, fine. And then what's not going to happen is any kind of change at the end. So do you still want to go through this process?" I highlight that story because, again, my superpower being the system is that there's a time and place for speaking up, because we want to be effective. Speaking up is important in order to raise awareness of what's happening in the system. But whether the system actually changes also depends on whether the leadership wants to do something about it. So I'm going to leave that story there for now, because there's a lot to be said about power dynamics when it comes to allyship. So what's at stake? A is for allyship and access. For me, that's, do you get the similar access to career opportunities at your company or in the organization that you work for? One of the other stories I have, one of my colleagues in Vancouver, I'm from Victoria, by the way. I flew in here. My parents live in Hamilton. That's why I'm sort of in town. She was working for this global engineering firm, and she got invited to this strategic planning session that happened to be on a boat with pretty much all just men, with a lot of alcohol involved, probably, because you're going out on a boat in the middle of nowhere with alcohol. The question is, does she go? Of course she didn't go. But then what is the cost of that to her access to opportunity? Because the way the company makes decisions and pushes people up is based on how they feel about you. Maybe nothing nefarious happens on the boat, but I mean, every person in this room can probably relate. Safety, number one issue, right? But the men in the group, some of them probably good intentions, but don't even realize that that's a thing. That they don't realize that when some of you, after 6 o'clock on a winter day coming from site, that's a safety issue. For someone like me, not knowing that, it's like, oh, it's just 6 p.m. Let's go straight to my car. And I know to ask, do you need me to walk you to that random unlit corner of the parking lot if you leave work? So allyship is about, how do I support effectively in order to make sure that you have access to what all of us, the rest of us that don't encounter these barriers, don't even think twice about having access to. That includes money, even just meaningful collaboration. So when I think about psychological safety, which is trust and feeling safe psychologically, the question then becomes, do I have the energy to have to be courageous and brave and to speak up all the time, every time I'm at work? This kind of like saying, okay, I got to dress up in a 3-piece suit every time I go to Tim Hortons because otherwise they're not going to serve me. It's not comparable at all, but it's kind of it's like, International Women's Day, everyone's like, yeah, empower all the women in my life. I'm so glad you're so brave. But what if we didn't have to be all the time just to get to do our work? Just to go into work every day and not have to do that. And that's a big part of what I help people with when it comes to allyship skills. Because they are just leadership skills. It's about being curious about people's experiences, understanding what they may be going through that I will never understand on an experiential level. At most, I will be able to understand it from an intellectual level. I'm not saying that these conversational dialogue skills is everything that you need in order to create change in the system. It's simply one mechanism. Because again, like I said, not everyone is ready and not everyone is interested in being part of it. But there are people that are. They just haven't been activated yet. They don't know what to do. They're afraid of making mistakes around helping. One of my favorite quotes on communication by the playwright George Bernard Shaw: "What's the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." And I start there because it's about intent versus impact. Here's what I meant to say. Here's what I meant to communicate. Here's what I meant to do. Here's what I hope the impact would be. But you'll have to tell me what the actual impact was on you. So we need that communication feedback loop. Communication isn't just a one-way thing. So perceptions versus assumptions. So I mentioned this because we all have different lived experiences, which means that we all will make different assumptions about the same situation based on how we've lived those triggers. So here's my perspective, just to give you an example. I was born in Manila at the age of 3, used to be hid in a bathtub during the People's Revolution because tanks would be rolling outside during the People's Revolution in Manila. And then at 3, moved to the Middle East right after the Gulf War. My dad was there as bombs were flying over Bahrain, and it was the Desert Storm. If anyone of you are familiar with that, Kuwait, Iraq, U.S. was involved. But I actually grew up pretty healthy. My mom was, like I said, was an industrial engineer, and she couldn't work as one because, who would hire her? Because no man would want to be a direct report to a woman in the early 90s, especially in the Middle East. And so, what can you do? You can't change the system per se by changing an entire culture. But she dragged me all over the bazaars and the souk, and she would take me to buy perfume and gold, and I would listen to her negotiate the heck out of these men. And we're like, yeah, no, I'm walking away. There's like 12 other gold stores down the street, so then we would ship it all back in our carry-ons, and because back then they didn't scan a whole lot of stuff and check-ins. And my grandfather would sell it all back. The person in the middle, that guy over there, is Carlos Escalante. He was probably one of my first allies because I encountered a lot of social anxiety when I was in school. Dr. Cramen, Engineering 1K03, I just remembered I was part of a group, and I had my speaking part. It was all written down. It was right in front of me in a sheet, and I couldn't say it. My nervous system shut down. And so I blanked out for 10 minutes, not knowing where and my group was looking at me. And it was like the longest 10 minutes. I still remember it feeling. But salsa dancing was the thing that helped me get out of my shell, if you will, in a sense that I still feel a lot of social anxiety. I just know that it's going to be fine on the other end of it. And I know how to manage the nervous system. I know how to calm it down a bit. So any of you who do get a chance to check out EFT, emotional freedom tapping, that's one way you can use to, I went to a lot of therapy to kind of help manage that. And teaching salsa dancing was one of the things that helped me kind of learn how to manage my anxiety. And I mention all of this because it influences the work that I do around allyship and interrupting harm and helping people go through change in terms of, okay, you want to help, but when you do help, something happens to you. Usually it's people trying to be right or people freezing and not saying anything at all. And a lot of that has a lot to do with nervous system. So for me, my pattern, and you'll have to kind of reflect on your own pattern, my pattern is I freeze. So I don't say anything, which is why I froze in that presentation instead of stammering and saying a whole lot of stuff that didn't make sense. Some people do that. They'll verbally process, right? That might be you. Someone like me, I shut down, I freeze, and I get someone else. It's like, you say something. You take the mantle and go. So I bring it back to allyship because what gets in the way of allyship actually has a lot to do with how you respond when you are under stress. So some people, like myself, would have a lack of confidence with a new skill. Allyship is a skill set. It's hard because it sometimes it has to go against power dynamics, especially if the person harmful holds power in the room. Sometimes it's overconfidence because you don't want to be vulnerable. And so people just barrel through, here's what I think is the right thing. I'm going to interrupt on behalf of my female colleague and I'm going to berate the person who interrupted her, and I'm going to be the hero of the day because that is the right thing to do. And I'll move on to awareness limit because I'm going to unpack that in a little bit. Awareness limitations. I mean by that is, do I recognize this situation as something I can be an ally for? And I frame that as allyship moments. And for those allies, for those of us that want to be allies but don't recognize it as an allyship moment, that's where we need the feedback loop with the people that we're trying to help. And if they don't trust us, they won't tell us and we'll never see it. And if they do tell us, but the one time they tell us took a lot of courage and I tell them, oh, it's just Bob. It's just the way Bob is all the time. You'll never tell me a thing again, maybe. Maybe you'll try again if it's really harmful, but so having that trust and learning to receive and listen to someone makes a huge difference. Systemic factors, what I want to say about this has a lot to do with cultural norms in your teams. By norms, I mean what behaviors are actually allowed, being complicit to, or even encouraged. And those systemic factors can only be really changed when there's enough buy-in from all across the hierarchy of the organization. So that includes especially leadership. So for example, this university in Europe, that person will keep their seat until they retire because the leadership says that's okay by not doing anything. They're signaling to the rest of the organization, we're okay with this because we value this person's money that they're bringing into the university than probably the dozens and hundreds of PhD students that they've probably traumatized for the years. So I talked a lot about this already, so I'm going to skip this. You got to have an open communication with the people you're trying to help. And then when you do recognize the situation, have you practiced the skills enough and have had enough opportunity to apply it in different scenarios where you can take the shot and make it. And if you don't make the shot, do you have the ability to repair the relationship, to try again? That matters a lot. I tell people who are trying to get this right is don't try and get it right. You're gonna fail. You're gonna suck at it at the very beginning. And people that might not even give you feedback. They'll just be like, yeah, thanks for helping. But you have to get curious. What was your actual impact? And if someone tells you, then you have something to work with. Then you have material that you can say, okay, I can get it better. Yep, don't need to talk about that. I actually, let me just check the time. I got 15 minutes. Nassim, are you still willing and ready? Okay, would you come up with me up here? Do we have a traveling mic, or maybe you can just... Yeah, perfect. We'll give you one. I'm bringing up Nassim because I only met her on LinkedIn last night. It was a random request. And I was like, oh, so probably be there at the conference tomorrow. And then, of course, as I walked into the coffee station, I recognized the name and said hello, and we had a conversation. But this demo, the point is just to demonstrate about holding space. And what I mean by holding space is, how can you have a conversation with someone and not have to fix it? I mean, I don't even know where we're going with this, actually. So, but just notice the questions that I ask, what I'm doing, not doing. Notice what the impact is on Nassim. I'm just going to ask her a bunch of questions, and I've already set up with her that if I ask questions she isn't willing to answer, no peer pressure. She can just literally tell me next question. But here's the starting question for you. What do you wish people realized more about you?
That I have a voice and I can speak up for myself, because sometimes people assume that maybe you're shy and you can't talk, or maybe because of my look, like they say maybe she's immigrant and she doesn't have that gut to talk. I just really appreciate if anywhere in our workplace or anywhere, that people know that we, a woman, we have a voice and we're not scared of talking about it. I know that even Michelle mentioned as well, when we speak up, there is a consequence, unfortunately, and that sometimes hit us so bad. But I really appreciate that if anybody, man or woman, they recognize that we can speak up. And I really want that people to know about that, about me as well. Another thing that I guess it was Janet who mentioned about speaking up. I think it was Michelle about saying that I don't bow down. It happened to me in my life. Sometimes that I'm the same thing. Like I respect people's decision. For example, in your corporate, your manager maybe make a decision, and maybe I'm not I agree with that decision, and I'm disagree, but I don't disrespect, but I do my own thing. You know, I do my own job, but I don't expect that manager to want me to clap for that decision or bow down to that decision. You make your own decision. You are a manager. You make your own decision. Okay.
Can I ask you a question about that, actually?
Yeah.
What value of yours is important to you that leads you to be that way?
It's because I believe I have a mind, and I want that diversity and the different point of view to be recognized. And I don't even want anybody to clap for me for having that mind. But at least don't try to crush it, you know? Just how I respect your decision, you respect mine too. Like just recognize that difference And I leave you alone with the decision that you made, and you leave me alone as well, and let me do my own thing, like the task, for example, the KPIs that I have. I'll do that in a perfect
Trust.
manner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just trust me. But
Can I slow you down for a second?
yeah.
I sense frustration in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I am frustrated because unfortunately I have experienced it. And it is really frustrating. Like I find it very frustrating. And from here that I see everybody sharing their own experience as well. I had that opportunity to speak with everyone, well, not with everyone, but with the people that I had the opportunity to speak with. I see that frustration is in kind of everybody somehow with some kind of experience. The one thing that you mentioned was very important to when you see something is happening, please speak up, please say it. I know we all are scared of what's going to happen after, and maybe it's not going to be good for us. But at least how our panelier mentioned, numbers are important.
Mhm.
At least you're making that noise, you're making that voice, and maybe it's going to be documented somewhere, and somehow, sometime it's going to be counted. And that's very important. Now, maybe I am just one person making this voice now, but eventually after 10 years, we're going to be 30. And maybe we're going to make that 30 by 30.
Mhm.
So that's why when you see it, I know it's very risky for us to talk about it. But I really do encourage everybody to talk about it. And yeah, it's and the reason why I feel confident to speak about it, it's because I know whatever consequence comes to me and affect me, it's not gonna break me down because I believe in myself, and I know, okay, I know I'm speaking up. I know it's gonna have consequence, but I know I can overcome that consequence because I believe in me and I have confidence and I believe in my qualification and experience. And I know that this is just going to be a stage. It's not going to be my whole life. I'm going to pass this stage and I'm going to be proud later on for not being blind in that situation. Like as you mentioned, like see it, recognize it, and then say something about it. It's really important.
Thank you, Naseem. I need to bring the conversation to a close, but here's a plot twist for everyone. You've just heard her talk for, I don't know, about 5-ish minutes. And I'm gonna just get here's where I'm designing with you. Just receive it. So those of you who just listen to her, what are some words you would describe that are like intensely obvious in Naseem? Shout it out and to her.
Passionate.
Compassionate.
Self-aware. Power.
Great. Confidence. Trust.
How does it feel?
Yeah, it's heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not easy sometimes to receive all of that, but it's true. Strong. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Yeah. Just a few minutes here. What did you see me do or not do so well? What was the impact? Shut it up. Feedback loop. Yeah. Well, I had an assumption and a validated assumption. Yeah.
you gave me the opportunity to come there and speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't work too hard, actually. You know, I didn't set her up with a script. The first question I asked her, I didn't tell her I was going to ask her that question. It's already, she knows that answer as well. Sorry?
Thought process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Kim?
Listening and asking about values.
Yeah. especially when things get hard, it depends on your pattern. For someone like me, I'll question whether I did something wrong. It depends on the person. And it's helpful to get a reflection back from someone else. Hey, don't get lost in the chaos of this. You are this already. And that's one of the most powerful things you can help someone through. It's not to just, you don't have to solve the problem for them, but you can remind them of who they are. And because of who they are, they will get through this. Psychologically, when things get hard, we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And what that means is we're emotionally dysregulated because we don't know what's safe and what isn't. And having someone just reflect back to you, reminding you of who you are, has a down-regulating, grounding is what we were calling it earlier, effect. But it's a skill we don't learn in technical and engineering schools because we're taught to let's move forward with the solution instead of let's stop what's here. What is your emotional state right now out of 1 to 7? Because that's going to impact whether or not you have the capacity to have a hard conversation. I ask my team members that, it's like, or clients, what's your state? Because maybe today is not the day. Or how do we get you to that state so that you can have it, especially if it needs to happen today? So I'm just going to manage time here. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to respect the hard stop. Here's a neuroscience framework to understand a little bit about trust and psychological safety. It's just a way for you to articulate it in a certain way. So status, for example, is if someone tells you on a construction site, yeah, but you're just a junior. Plus on top of that, you're a woman. I'm not going to listen to you. That's status. They destroy or really poke at your status, and it makes you feel like, ugh. Just notice and I'm sorry I'm putting you through that. But just notice the visceral feeling that gives you. There's certainty, which is if someone tells you, yeah, I don't know if I can do that for you. Especially when you've given them the information of something happened back there. Autonomy. Not enough choice, no choice, or too many choices. You want to have just the right amount. Otherwise, it gets overwhelming, or you feel out of control, or you don't have agency. The coaching approach is about giving someone autonomy. Instead of me telling you the answer, I might have a suggestion, but I'm still going to ask you, what kind of conversation do you need this to be right now? Do you want me to just listen to you? Or do you want to solve for this? So one story I have, I used to volunteer a lot for a nonprofit called the Water Environment Federation. And my vice chair of the Young Professionals Committee came to me and said, I just had a conversation at the table. This guy said, oh, I understand that you're here. She was Mexican Chinese as a diversity representation on the committee. And she didn't have a response for that. How could she? Because her nervous system shut down. And so her first conversation she wanted to have was with me coming out of this dinner was, I don't know what to say to that. And so the first conversation I had with her was, how do we calm you down? And then we can talk about how you want to solve this. Because I can do something, I can talk to someone, but what would be helpful for you? No. I'm going to be the one to talk to this person. But I just didn't have access to the words at the time. I did a similar demo in Munich. The conversation took a very different turn. And the thing we talked about was, if you have a situation just like that where you shut down, what would be helpful from me? And the person who I was talking to said, I just need you to give me a little air cover. If you're still in the meeting, just take the reins a bit, give me about a minute, and then hand it back to me, and I'll take it. Because there was a person on her team that, or on the client side, that kept shutting her down. I just need you to support me a little bit on that. I'm like, cool, got it. But having those kinds of conversations and dialogue is what makes allyship really practical. Because allyship is kind of cool as a concept. Oh, it's going to solve the system. But where it really matters is on the ground. Because without that support, people leave with that very sick feeling of, this sucks. I'm not coming back here anymore. And as more of those happen, and you know no one's got your back, there's no surprise people don't stay when the environment is really harmful. Because you can't sustain that for a long time. Not to your ego, not to your emotional health. So I would love for you to reflect what makes you trust people. There's a question earlier. I forget your name, but you asked about a leader that who says, oh, it's just about merit. And the way I see it is, as much as I can be frustrated that there are people that will say things that are not great, and instead of me feeling frustrated, I think of it as, oh, you've told me a little bit about yourself, about what kind of leader you're going to be for me if I join your team. I mean, I would love for you to not have said that, but since you did, now I know. Thanks for sharing a little bit. So just a bit of a mindset shift around, we wish people were different than how they show up sometimes, and we wish they didn't have the negative impact. And we are making those changes. And it's, yes, speak up, yes, do things, yes, boost your courage up. But know that you don't have to do it alone. So I'm gonna just flip to the very last slide here. Oh, I don't want to miss this slide. Change Catalyst. This is a great kind of framework for identifying where you might be as an ally. I'll leave that there. I know I'm on time. I'm at time, 1 minute over. I'll leave you with actually this slide. Let me just go back. Allyship. Allyship is not about you messed up, that was terrible. Allyship is about inspiring to be better, to be empathetic. It's like, I understand what you intended there, did not have the impact you intended. Balanced with accountability. You can get curious and understand what they were trying to do. Cool, but don't relieve them of the accountability of getting the impact right, getting the impact better. Do be clear about that, as opposed to, it's okay, you tried. Gives them zero feedback as to what might help them get better. You have to be clear. And if they are bought in and want to be a part of the solution, they will get it better. And if they do not want to try, then you know who's got your back. I'm going to close it here, as I know I want to make sure our next speakers have time, Ali and Michelle. Let me just go back here. Please keep in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can shoot me an email. Over to you, Aaron.